commission. A couple of them. First of all, you reference clear expectations for stakeholders within this commission. What are those clear expectations?
I'm sorry, are you referring to the staff report?
Yes.
Okay. So what we're trying to do is establish some very clear expectations as far as what the artist is required to do, and that's what the two added sections are. And so that's more specifically what we're referring to. What we have found is that in adding public art to buildings, we were accepting a lot of the responsibility into our permanent collection. And we're finding that our public art funds can only be used for new projects. And so we can't be used for upkeep or maintenance of any current projects. As a result, what we have done over the last year and a half, 2 years or so since we've been doing this, we've been adding the information into the agreements that we have with the artist to say that it sunsets within 5 years. So what we're choosing to do with the code update is to actually have that included in the municipal code so that more clearly defines what that responsibility is. In addition to that, we've also established that one section with regard to city staff that we have the right to be able to oversee the safety and compliance within any public art items that have gone up, whether it's a mural on a building, whether it is a sculpture that may have been placed in a public place. If it is no longer safe or it requires when the artist is doing the installation, we have the right to be able to review and establish very specific criteria for them to allow the continuation of the installation of that process.
So it sounds like this is partly, in large part, a budgetary move. Is that an accurate assessment?
I would say yes.
Okay. And if I'm summarizing the move correctly, what you're saying is the city formally sort of obligated itself to maintain public art for an indefinite period of time in accordance with whatever funds we had available, but now we're putting sunsets on that, we're putting a limit, and it sounds like the limit's about 5 years?
That is accurate.
And we're going to bake that into the code, as opposed to just trying to make that on a per-contract basis?
That is also accurate, yes.
Okay.
Unless we choose to add that into our permanent collection. So, for example, we are in the process of being gifted a couple of art pieces from the Escondido Community Foundation. Okay. And although they are temporary art installations, one of the artists has requested that it be included as a part of our permanent collection. So we're in the process of investigating whether or not that's something that we want to be able to do.
And when it is incorporated into the permanent collection, at that point we assume perpetual liability and costs associated with maintaining.
That is accurate.
Okay. How big is the fund?
Right now, the fund itself is has about $1.2 million in that fund. However, we have obligations, according to our annual work plan, of about $900,000 currently.
Okay, so of the 1.2, 900,000 is obligated in some form or fashion.
That's correct.
Leaving 300
roughly.
And then how much do you expect to gain by adding these sunset provisions? Or is there no gain because this is go forward?
Correct. There is no gain because because what would happen is the maintenance of those items would fall on the city's general fund, so it would come to the obligation of the Community Services Department to maintain those.
And is the fund, to the best of your knowledge, in any sort of way planned for growth?
We receive a dedicated amount of money on an annual basis based on developer fees that are also written into the code.
I see. Okay. So as the fund grows, we're going to be able to realize more and more gain because we're going to be sunsetting our obligations on future projects, so we won't be obligated to set aside funds to maintain them. Like a mural, for example, I assume the maintenance fee would be repainting the mural periodically, that sort of thing. And what you're saying is, hey, right now we're sort of obligating ourselves to maintain these murals, but going forward on future murals, we won't be doing that, so that we can maybe rededicate those funds to other art installations.
So the public art funds do not allow us to do any type of maintenance work. So that would not affect the public art fund. What it's actually affecting is our operating fund out of the general fund. So that's what we're looking at being able to mitigate.
What does the operating fund pay for?
Our operation, it depends on what it is annually. Right now, we do not dedicate funds for the maintenance of public art. The Public Art Commission is currently working towards some creative fundraising to be able to do that for some of the projects or for some of the pieces within our permanent collection. The largest piece being, for example, the Queen Califia's Magic Garden.
Okay. So we don't have any funds to maintain that at the moment?
That is accurate.
Okay. And this legislation helps us to get those funds to maintain it? Because it's a kind of a centerpiece for the city. Like, it's all over our tourist promotions, and anything on social media that has to do with Escondido often references this particular art installation. So it feels pretty important.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So we're working towards some creative opportunities to be able to fundraise and fund some of those. In the past, some of the maintenance has come from our department and the general fund when there has been significant issues that have arisen with that piece specifically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then art in lieu and in lieu of fees what does this specifically refer to?
So when a developer comes in, they are generally have to pay a certain amount or percentage to go towards public art. So they have the opportunity to either pay those funds, or they have the opportunity to actually erect the public art themselves.
Interesting. And is the reason for this because developers have asked for it?
So that's actually was written into the code back in the 90s when this was when this section of the code was added.
Okay. Have developers asked for this?
So the most recent one is the Palomar Heights project, which is obviously not Palomar Heights anymore. They've recently unveiled their art, and so that would be what would be considered art in lieu of fees.
And do you find that the art that these developers are installing in the city are equal to or of greater value than the fees they would have paid that you would have then been able to use at your discretion?
So that is a great question, and that's also why there is some update in the code language to ensure that going forward. Because before it was more of a, this is what we would have spent kind of a thing. A really great item is, and I forget the name of it right offhand, but basically they look like landscape. They're just simply rocks over at the Trader Joe's complex.
Yeah.
And that was actually considered public art by the developer. And so the Public Art Commission itself was not particularly fond of that, but they didn't have any recourse for saying that's not what we would consider public art or the value of the public art that we believe that you should have installed.
Yeah. Okay, so that's baked into what we're approving this evening.
That is correct.
Can you give us an example of what sort of oversight you will have as a result of our passage of this language if we do in fact vote to pass?
It's a great question. I don't have an exact idea of what that oversight would look like. The Community Services Department would work with the Planning Department to ensure that would happen.
What's the relationship between your department and the Planning Department?
It's a very positive one. We work regularly with Veronica on a number of different projects.
Yeah, but I mean specifically, so if, for example, we're focused on like the downtown area plan, the specific plan, and we say, hey, we should have some art on those new roundabouts that don't seem to have anything on them right now. Would that be something that you guys would have a role in, and if so, at what point?
We do actually have a role in that. All public art does come through the Public Art Commission, and in fact, referring to the roundabout specifically, there was about $250,000 that was dedicated specifically to public art for the Grand Avenue Vision project. When that came before the Public Art Commission, they decided that was not enough and added an additional $250,000 to that project, making it a total of $500,000 for that particular project. We will be releasing an RFP for that particular project within the next week.
So the goal will be at some point to put some art on those roundabouts?
That is correct. So the way that will work specifically is the only roundabout that will be getting art is the main one at Broadway and Grand Avenue. with the opportunity for companion pieces either along Grand Avenue or throughout the city that would attract people back to that Grand Avenue roundabout.
Why is that the only one getting art?
It is my understanding that there is an issue with the roundabout itself, ensuring that our emergency vehicles are able to get through. The only one that would be wide enough for them to be able to do that, there wouldn't run over the roundabout itself and thereby damaging the artwork, is the one at Grand and Broadway.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So that goes through you in coordination with the planning department.
That is correct. And in fact, just recently, there was another project that I believe may have come before you with Vita Brands and the silos that will be going in off of 2nd, and I believe it's Quinn's. And then...
Oh, you're breaking news here. Look at Veronica, how
sorry.
uncomfortable she is.
Am I not
No. Say more. Say more.
I will interject for just 1 second, which is Robert is speaking about a project. However, that project does not come to Planning Commission. It is a director level decision, so that actually won't be something that comes before you at public hearing.
I'm nuts.
But to clarify on Robert's point of the process, planning division staff are involved with this during the conceptual process on private development projects. So the fee that he is speaking to is a developer impact fee for art. So if an applicant chooses to pay the fee, there is no art commission process, there is no art review. They pay the fee at the point in time that developer impact fees are required, which is typically building permit. If a project wants to provide art in lieu, like the Marlowe project, formerly known as Palomar Heights, then that happens during the conceptual review, and under the proposed amendments that are coming to you this evening for the public art ordinance, it would define that process much more, it would structure it much more from our end and allow us more oversight in ensuring that the art we receive is commensurate with developments that are proposed, and just detail that process for greater transparency to both the developer and to staff.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry, overstepped there.
Just don't want to make any promises
Gotcha.
of projects that won't come before this body.
Commissioner Juster, you look like you might have had a question.
No, I'm good.
You're good. Any other questions from staff? Commissioner Barber?
Yes, as that discussion went on, when we were referring to the in lieu art, that made me remember in the early 90s, the developer of the Felicita Plaza decided he erected his own art, which was underwhelming. I don't know if you...
That's the project I was referring to at the
Trader Joe's?
Yeah.
Okay, so those of you who may not be familiar with it, and the developer took me to see it after it was erected, because I had contact, I knew them. He took stones and placed them parallel as if it was a finger, but not the index finger. As I pulled up and saw it, I immediately recognized what it says. What have you named this art? And the horse you rode in on? But it's not maintained there anymore. So what happened?
So the because that is privately funded and on private property, those are the responsibilities of those property owners to be able to maintain those pieces going forward.
Okay, so is he to replace it?
I do not believe that he is obligated to replace it at the end of its quote-unquote lifespan.
Okay, I was just thank you very much. That just occurred to me while you two were having that discussion. I think this question may be more for Veronica, but the short-term rentals, okay, pursuant to Chapter 16, Article 8, they're going to be able to be approved without a conditional use permit, correct?
Yes, so the change before you this evening is simply memorializing the use as it's been permitted by the City Council through this short-term rental ordinance that was adopted in October of 2024.
And that's really my question. Could you explain to us what exactly was adopted by the council? Because we wanted certain stipulations and more control over them.
So yes, I can give you a high-level overview. The planning division was not the lead division, and development services was not the lead department on implementing and drafting this ordinance. We were involved in the process. However, our economic development and real property team were the folks who managed this project. So high level, the short-term rental ordinance establishes short-term rentals as a permitted use within the city, subject to a number of conditions and criteria. It sets a maximum capacity for short-term rentals within the city, so there is a quantified maximum of number of units, short-term rental units that could occur within the city. It also sets certain provisions, distances, for example, from public schools. So there is a mandatory 500-foot buffer distance from public schools. I will amend that to say just schools, I believe, in general. To the proposed short-term rental, and the process for permitting a short-term rental is through the business licensing division, I believe, and the planning division is involved from that land use perspective of ensuring it conforms with those standards as part of that business license review process. I'm saying business license, that's like the division that's going to handle these short-term rental permits. So it is not going to be a planning permit that is issued for a short-term rental, not a conditional use permit, not a plot plan, not anything through planning. We will just be a reviewing division of the permit process through a separate department. Any short-term rentals that existed prior to compliance with this ordinance are technically unpermitted uses that were never allowed by the city's municipal code, so they were they were illegal uses technically, so they're not subject to any of our non-conforming provisions that are within the municipal code because they were not legally established.
Thank you. I have a couple simple questions. This is just to help expand my knowledge of land use, because as I thumbed through it, there's a couple of questions came to my mind that I didn't understand why what equals this. So for example, regarding the parking spaces required with the Mugwump West, it says there shall be provided a guest parking space for each 4 units or fraction thereof on-street parking spaces when approved by staff. Or may be counted toward fulfilling this requirement street frontages abutting the subject property. What is the difference between on-street parking and frontage parking abutting the property?
So I can go ahead and jump in there. So I just want to clarify. I will answer your question, Vice Chair Barber, but I just want to make sure that the commission understands that the change involved in Article 39 that you're referencing right now is purely just a reorganization of how this language is formatted, because we found that the prior formatting confused quite a number of folks. So we gave it subsections and made it very clearly numerated. So there are no substantive changes here. But that being said, you're referring to the on-street parking spaces and then street frontages abutting the subject property. On-street parking spaces are exactly that. They're not on the private property, right? They're located within the public right-of-way on the street frontage itself. We typically don't, that is not a normal standard parking stall we would count for required parking, but we do have provisions in our zoning code, such as this, that allow us to leverage that for parking under certain circumstances. So normally required parking has to be wholly within your private property. So if you have 10 spaces you need to provide 10 parking stalls on your private property. However, there are provisions for you to count stalls that may be on the public street. And so that's what on-street parking is in reference to. Could you repeat the second part of your question?
Well, I do understand what on-street parking is.
Okay.
What I don't understand is then you further state in the amendment, or you may be counted toward fulfilling this requirement through street frontage abutting the subject property. Well, wouldn't that also be on the street?
You're referencing the actual changes in this article, right? Or are you speaking just generally to a section of Article 39?
Page 37. And it's under multiple dwellings, it's in bold underlined B. B as in Barber.
Sorry, I went to 37 of the numbered packet, but I think you mean of the PDF pages. The sentence, street frontages abutting the subject property and which are included in the circulation element, is that the section we're talking about?
Yes.
So that's stating that for the on-street parking spaces, we would not count street frontages that abut the subject property and are included in the circulation element.
Okay.
So it's a
Okay, now I understand now. Thank you.
Well, I will add, because our assistant city engineer whispered that the reason for that is because these potential parking stalls could be removed upon future build-out of the ultimate right-of-way width of the roadway.
Okay. This is just a question because it just tickled me when I was looking at the breakdowns of all the retail what's permitted and what requires certain conditional use permits. Why do we bother to distinguish and separate, for example, the bargain basement stores from just general retail? Why do we get so specific in breaking these down? What's the difference? Are any other conditions applied to a bargain basement store to any other retail? Or bargain basement to a thrift store, which is also distinguished as an individual category?
So historically, in my experience, there's always an interest from electeds and decision makers to regulate thrift stores and secondhand stores. That's a common occurrence I've seen in multiple jurisdictions. I'm not quite familiar with our city's history on it. I'm happy to pull the original ordinances from when those were established and give you that background. I'd have to follow up with you via email on that. But generally, the bargain basement stores, we typically just regulate in terms of ensuring that there are compliance with certain standards, such as, I want to say this isn't the correct way to say this, but storage of the materials, right? So you're receiving a high volume of product, and we want to ensure that that product is not stored outside, that it's kept wholly within a building, that there's appropriate means for that, and same with typically thrift stores. That's historically been a requirement that is not associated with general retail. But if you'd like more on our background specifically, I'm happy to follow up.
If you have time. It's not essential. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions of staff? I don't have any questions. Ms. Roldan and Mr. Rhodes, thank you very much for the effort that you put into this to clean up our codes. It's much appreciated. With that, we have a motion.
Move to approve Resolution 2025-01, including the modification that for staff is recommended on Chapter 32, Article 2.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Barber. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Stevie. If we could have the vote.
Voting has been opened, and again, this is to approve the resolution with the suggested modifications from staff. And the vote is 4-0 to approve the resolution with modifications.
All right, excellent. Thank you. At this point, we will go ahead and move on to current business items. Are there any items that the Planning Commission would like to bring forward to the Commission at a future date? Looks like none. Well, that was current business. I'm sorry, that was future agenda items. Any other oral communications?
No further at this time. No.
Planning Commissioners report. Anybody got anything to report upon? Seeing none. City Planners report. Future agenda items.
Yes, so again, welcome, 2025, first PC meeting of the year. We will anticipate having a planning commission meeting on January 28th. We have 2 items slotted right now for that meeting. One is going to, well, actually both of them are modifications to existing conditional use permits. So one pertains to an educational facility, a school, and the other is for interfaith community services. So that will be on the 28th. And then we currently do not have anything beyond bylaws scheduled for February 11th. It's coming back. It's going to get here, I promise. But we did send out, planning staff did send out a calendar of future dates for Planning Commission. And at this point, we do anticipate having a February 11th meeting, but if for any reason we don't, you'll be notified.
All right, thank you.
Veronica, may I ask a question? You mentioned that what's going to be coming to us at the next meeting are these modifications to the conditional use permit. So I have a question about a modification to a conditional use permit that's going to be seen by the city council tomorrow night. And I'm curious as to what, aren't modifications to conditional use permits, aren't they supposed to go to the planning commission before they go to the city council? Why has the planning commission been bypassed on this?
So I will provide the answer, and I'll just ask Dare to interject if I provide erroneous information. So the item that is scheduled for tomorrow's city council meeting is a staff recommendation to the city council to open and to modify a existing conditional use permit, subject to a provision in Article 61, Division 1 conditional use permits, where the city council has authority to modify, revoke, or suspend conditional use permits. So this is not a private applicant-driven modification to the conditional use permit. So in other words, the operator, Interfaith Community Services, has not applied through the planning division to modify their conditional use permit. Rather, this is a city internally driven modification to an existing conditional use permit due to nuisance concerns stemming from various city departments. And so city staff are making a recommendation to the council to modify that conditional use permit, subject to that provision within the conditional use permit section of the zoning code that gives city council the authority to simply modify, revoke, or suspend.
I would prefer the commission have input on this, but if that's legal and that's the city's direction, then there's nothing I can comment on.
Yeah, so it is Article 61, Division 1, and let me tell you the specific section. It's loading, sorry. I will say the section is called out in the staff report of the city council item, so in case you don't catch it. It's section 33-1207, modification or revocation of conditional use permits.
I agree.
I mean, you're on the record. You can opine on the record right now at the risk of keeping Chair Weiler here longer than he wants to be. You could opine on the record right now. Look at that can of worms.
I would defer to the city attorney on whether or not an opining on that is appropriate at this time.
Well, I actually think because it's not an agendized item, I would want to be careful. I don't know that you can opine at the moment on that. But you also could certainly go to the city council meeting and opine there. You can be comment.
I can opine here. I can only whine here.
Let me ask a clarifying question. If and this has come up a little bit in the past, if a planning commissioner wishes to opine on anything, is it not appropriate to opine stating that you're a member of the planning commission? And, I mean, it's like when you come up and say, look, you know, I'm Stan Weiler and I'm on the planning commission and, you know, here's my opinion. Is it more appropriate for commissioners to say, you know, I'm Stan Weiler and a member of the community and here's my opinion?
You can certainly state that you're a member of the planning commission. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to be careful not to imply that you're speaking on behalf of the planning commission. You're speaking as an individual. You happen to be also a planning commissioner.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the clarification. Any more discussion? With that, welcome to 2025, everyone, and our first meeting is adjourned.